looking at paragraph 4. It says, when the wagon train got to the west, the families would settle there, building homes, starting farms. They would create communities, and instead of being partners in a trip, they were collaborators in community. Those communities would grow into towns, and then some would expand into cities from a wagon train to a metropolis. So what is this paragraph telling me? What is it teaching me? What is it explaining to me? Why did the author include it? What is its purpose for being in this passage, Anna Grace?
It's talking about how like when other families stuff that they would get on in like the wagon trains like upon the
Metropolises. And so how they grew, how they got bigger, okay? So how it started out from the wagon train all the way to a metropolises is what this is about. So it's telling me about the communities growing. Okay? And then paragraph 5. In the next century, people built a railroad that crossed the United States. By 1900, there were many more people in the West, and thousands of people came west by train. A trip that had taken months now took passengers a few days of comfortable transit. The railroad brought many changes, and the pioneers became legends as the country developed into the nation of today. All right, so what is this one about? What is this one explaining to me? What is it bringing to me? What is it doing in this paragraph, Paul? Railroads, okay? It's talking about the introduction of railroads and how that changed the way that they traveled, okay? So now that we have looked at each paragraph, we're going to turn it over and we're going to start looking at our questions. Okay? Question 1 says, many people traveled west to escape the dangers that they had faced in the east. Is that a true statement? So what is not correct about that statement? They weren't trying to escape dangers. So A, that's a no-go. We're going to X that out. All right, let's look at B. The Americans who first traveled to the west to seek out a better life paved the way for the many people who followed. Does that tell me what the central idea of the article is?
No.
The Americans who first traveled to west to seek out a better life paved the way for the many people who followed. So what's wrong about it? What's wrong about it?
It says it paved the way for all the other people. No, it didn't. It's a question.
Paved the way means it made a way for them to start moving westward. It encouraged them to start moving westward.
Oh, yeah. I thought they meant like a trail.
Oh, see, so this is another example of a homograph where the word paved sounds the same and is spelled the same, but it has two different meanings, okay? So we know paved as to lay asphalt or concrete, where paved can also mean to make a new way, okay? So that's something that you can kind of put.
Like make a new way, like if you're trying to make it straight.
It could be. So if you pave a way to Grandma's house through the backwoods, you're creating that way through there. Okay? Right. All right. So I'm going to put a question mark by B because there's nothing in that statement that makes me feel like this couldn't be an answer. There's nothing just crazy off the wall because in part A we saw that they were trying to escape the dangers that they faced in the east, and that's not at all what was happening. So we knew we could mark A out. there's nothing incorrect about B. So I'm gonna leave it up there with my little question mark, because that could be the answer. Alright, looking at C. The risks taken by people traveling west were dangerous and unnecessary.
No.
Did this passage talk to us about it being dangerous or unnecessary?
When they was headed west, it was dangerous a little bit.
Did it tell us what the dangers they faced? Did it tell us about the people coming and robbing them? Did it tell us about the wild animals that were out to get them?
Yes.
It did. What paragraph? What paragraph? Okay. So, right. So, is that a good answer? No, because it doesn't talk about the West being dangerous. Okay? So I'm going to put an X there. Let's look at D. Traveling to the West was difficult and time consuming in the 1840s. That's true. Just as it is today.
Well, happy trails and bright beginnings to lower pickup. Happy trails and bright beginnings to lower pickup.
So that second part is just as it is today. Is it difficult and time consuming to travel west today? No. So that is a no-go. Today. It's asking, the second part of that says, just as it is today. Meaning that it is difficult and time consuming today. I could leave this afternoon, be on the west coast by this evening, and get up tomorrow and fly to New York City in a couple of hours. And I could be, within 24 hours, I could leave from here and go to Los Angeles and then fly to New York. And if it were back in this day, would have that been possible to get there in 24 hours?
Wait, wouldn't it be 12:30 right now in California? Are you going there?
Something like that. Alright, so my answer is B. Alright, so now, looking at part B. Part B has to support part A. Okay? So, whatever, like all four of these statements are in the passage. They're all in there, word for word in there. Quotes, direct quotes from the passage. But only one of them talks about the Americans who traveled to the West to seek out a better life, paving the way for the many people who followed. So let's look at A. Although it was difficult in the 1840s, many people traveled far across the United States from the East to the West. Does that say the Americans who were first traveling to the West to seek a better life paved the way for people who followed?
No.
It talks about the people who traveled west, but it says nothing about them paving a way for new people to follow. So I'm going to mark A out. Looking at B. It would take more than a year to reach the West, and many things happened along the route. Does that tell me that Americans who first traveled the West to seek out a better life paved the way for many people who followed?
No.
No. Looking at C. They would create communities, and instead of being partners in a trip, they were collaborators in a community. Does that tell me about Americans who first traveled to the West to seek out a better life, paving the way for many people who followed?
No.
It talks about them traveling west. They would create communities, and instead of being partners in a trip, they were collaborators in a community. But does it tell me about them paving the way for people to follow?
No.
Alright, let's look at D. And the pioneers became legends as the country developed into the nation of today.
Yes.
The pioneers were those people who first traveled to the West to seek a better life, and then them paving the way was developed into a nation of today. The country developed into a nation today. That's telling me that they paved the way for more people to follow. So my answer is D. Alright? Looking at number 3. Which of the following is most closely matches the definition of the word metropolises as it is used in paragraph 4. So let's turn back to paragraph 4. And let's look for the word metropolises. Alright. When the wagon train got to the west, the families would settle there, building homes, starting farms. They would create communities, and instead of being partners in a trip, they were collaborators in community. These communities would grow into towns, and then some would expand into cities from a wagon train to a metropolises. So that's telling me they went from a wagon train to a metropolises. Well, back in the passage it says they started out as a wagon train, and from that wagon train they become communities, and from communities they become towns, and then from towns some of them expanded into cities. Okay? So looking at this, I'm going from wagon train to where? Communities, to towns, and then finally to cities. So metropolises, what is a metropolises?
It's like,
It's a city, it's a large city. So when I think of the word metropolises or metropolitan or something like that, I think of like New York City or New Orleans or Los Angeles or
San Diego.
San Diego, any of those really, really large cities. Okay? So I think that metropolis is going to mean a large city, so let's go back and see if any of our answer choices support that. A says a society that contains mostly families. B says an active, bustling city with a large population.
It has the word city in it.
Oh, it has the word city in it. City. Okay. C says a city that does not include new technologies.
No. What?
Right. So we know it's not A. Maybe it's B. C was good until it said does not include new technologies.
Yeah, that was good.
And then D is a deserted or empty piece of land.
Yeah.
Definitely not. So my answer is B. Good. Alright, so now let's look at what phrase from paragraph 4 best supports that a metropolises is an active, bustling city with a large population. A says they were collaborators in community. Does that tell me that a city, an active, bustling city with a large population is a
Nothing to do
metropolis?
with the city.
No. B says communities would grow into towns.
No.
C, some would expand into cities.
Yeah.
Oh. D. D, from a wagon train.
No.
So my answer is C. Alright? So now, on this last one,
That's where it got wrong. Yeah.
did I say I missed some of them?
You said, such as a question mark.
Oh, we're looking at number 5 now?
Yeah.
Alright, so let's look at number 5. Alright, so, according to the text, how did the journey west affect the families that traveled in wagon trains? What did I get on most of y'all? What did I write? What did I have to write on most everybody's paper? Restate. Okay, so one problem that we had was you failed to restate. Now that was the one thing, I was looking for 2 things. I was looking that you restated the question, and I was looking that you had the correct answer, or somewhere around there the correct answer. Okay, so watch this. This is what I'm going to do to kind of help you with restating that question. I'm going to take out, the beginning says according to the text. That's not that important. How did the journey west affect the families that traveled in wagon trains? I'm going to take the question words how did out. Okay? So then I got my restatement right there. The journey, I'm rewriting what it has there. The journey west affected, which one? Affect the families or affected the families? That's the only word I gotta change. Affected the families that traveled in wagon trains because, and I'm actually gonna go back here
And look,
to where it says, down here in this last paragraph, how were they affected? They were affected because they had problems that delayed them. Okay? One problem that delayed them was having to stop for several days after a woman had a baby. Okay? So there, I gave you the main idea of the paragraph that talked about problems that they had, and I gave you one of the examples that they gave.
okay, now that's easier. I didn't even know this was easier. Number 4, I put C, wasn't that the answer?
Yeah, the Cooper said I got his wrong too. I must have, when I was going
You got
through.
mine too?
Okay, so the good news is though, these aren't going in the grade book. So,
But do we have to get them
we are
signed?
going to start it today,
We have to give
and
them
you're gonna finish it in the morning, okay?
I got
So,
it.
I'm gonna come around and hand those out.
They pay me